It was Christmas Eve, and the city was louder than usual. Cars moved slowly through the streets, horns mixed with music, and shop windows glowed with bright lights and decorations. People walked fast, holding shopping bags, laughing, talking on their phones, or rushing home before it got too late. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to go. Everyone except her. She sat on the cold pavement near a closed bakery, her thin jacket pulled tight around her small body. The metal shutter behind her was cold, and the wind slipped through the cracks in the street, cutting through her clothes. Snow had started falling lightly, landing on her dark hair and melting into tiny drops. She did not brush it away. She barely noticed it. Her hands were red from the cold. Between them, she held a piece of old cardboard. The words were written unevenly, as if the writer's hands had been shaking. The message was simple. It asked for food. It asked for help. It did not beg. It did not explain much. It did not need to. She could not speak. Her voice had been gone for years. People passed her without slowing down. Some looked at her for half a second, and then looked away. Others didn't notice her at all. A few stared, then quickly turned their faces as if feeling uncomfortable. Children pulled their parents' hands, pointing at lights and toys in the windows. Unaware of the quiet pain sitting just a few steps away, she watched shoes more than faces. Boots, heels, sneakers. Clean, warm, moving fast. Every pair of shoes meant someone who was going somewhere safe. Someone who would eat tonight. Someone who would sit in warmth. Her stomach hurt. Not the sharp pain from earlier, but the heavy, empty feeling that came after days of little food. She swallowed and pressed her lips together. She had learned not to cry loudly. Crying didn't help. It only made people angry or suspicious. Silent tears were easier. They fell slowly down her cheeks, warm against her cold skin. A memory passed through her mind. The kind that came when the streets went quiet for just a moment. She remembered a small room long ago, a single window, and a weak light. She remembered hands signing to her, gentle and careful. She remembered being held when she was scared. That life felt very far away now, like something borrowed from someone else's story. A group of young people walked past her, laughing, carrying wrapped gifts. One of them noticed her sign and slowed down. For a second, hope rose in her chest. She lifted her eyes and offered a small, polite nod. The person hesitated, then shook their head and walked away. The group kept laughing, their voices fading into the noise. She lowered her eyes again. The bakery behind her had been warm earlier in the day. She had stood nearby, breathing in the smell of bread and sweet buns, trying to remember what it felt like to eat until full. The owner had closed hours ago, locking the door without looking at her. She didn't blame him. People had told her many times that kindness was expensive. The cold grew stronger as the evening moved on. Christmas music played from speakers somewhere above the street. The song sounded happy, full of bells and cheer. To her it felt heavy. It reminded her that this night meant family, food, and warmth for others. For her it meant surviving until morning. She shifted her legs slightly, trying to get feeling back into them. Her shoes were worn, the soles thin. She had stuffed pieces of old cloth inside to block the cold, but it wasn't enough. Her fingers were stiff now. She adjusted the cardboard sign so it wouldn't fall. A man in a long coat walked past, then stopped suddenly. He looked down at her, his face tight with irritation. He said something she couldn't hear clearly over the noise. His mouth moved fast. She knew that look. She shook her head gently and pointed to her mouth, then to her ears, a habit she had developed. She tried to show she couldn't speak. The man sighed loudly and waved his hand as if telling her to move away. She nodded quickly, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. She pulled her sign closer and pressed herself against the wall, making herself smaller. The man walked away, still shaking his head. Her chest felt tight. Not from the cold this time, but from the familiar feeling of being unwanted. She watched the sky darken. Streetlights came on, casting long shadows across the pavement. The snow fell more steadily now. Each snowflake landed softly, quietly, like the world was trying not to disturb her pain. She wondered where she would sleep that night. Sometimes she found space in a shelter, sometimes under a bridge, sometimes in an open doorway. Christmas Eve made everything harder. Shelters filled fast. Doors closed early. She had learned to be ready for disappointment. Her eyes burned, but she did not wipe them. She focused on breathing slowly, in and out, just like she had taught herself to do when things became overwhelming. Panic helped no one. A woman walked past carrying a bag of bread. The smell made her stomach twist. Without thinking, she lifted her hand slightly, not touching, just asking. The woman glanced at her, then clutched her bag tighter and walked faster. The girl's hand dropped back to her lap. She felt invisible. Not because people couldn't see her, but because they chose not to. Cars continued to pass. Headlights reflected off the wet road, creating bright lines that stretched and disappeared. Then she noticed one car moving slower than the others. It was long, dark, and clean, different from the rest. It didn't rush. It rolled quietly through the traffic, as if time mattered less to it. She looked up for a moment, then looked away again. Expensive cars usually meant people who did not look twice at someone like her. She hugged her knees, her shoulders shaking slightly as another tear slipped free. She thought about how she used to believe Christmas was special. A day when good things happened. A day when people were kinder. Now, it felt like any other cold night, just louder and brighter for everyone else. Her cardboard sign bent slightly as the wind picked up. She pressed it flat again. She didn't know why she kept holding it. Maybe because it was proof that she existed. Proof that she had asked. Her breath formed small white clouds in the air. She watched them fade quickly. Everything faded quickly these days. Hope, warmth, trust. She did not notice that the slow-moving car had stopped a short distance away. She did not hear the door open. Her world had narrowed to the cold, the pavement, and the effort of staying still and quiet for now. She was just a silent girl on a busy street, crying without sound on Christmas Eve, surrounded by light, but trapped in the dark. The cold seemed to grow sharper as the night went on. The snowflakes falling on the pavement were now heavier, melting on her thin jacket and making it cling to her skin. Her hands were numb, and she could barely feel her toes inside her worn shoes. Yet she did not move. She could not move. The city around her felt too loud, too alive, and she was too small, too quiet, too invisible to be part of it. She tried to catch the attention of people passing by, lifting her cardboard sign a little higher. Her fingers trembled, but it was not from the cold alone. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. The sharp emptiness twisted inside her. Her throat felt dry. She had not eaten anything solid since the previous day, and even that had been scraps she had managed to find in a dumpster. She did not complain. Crying did not help. She only looked, waited, silently hoped. The first person she tried to approach was a young man carrying a large box wrapped in bright red paper. She held out a hand, pointing to her mouth, hoping he would understand she needed food. He looked down at her, saw the small figure crouched on the pavement, and his expression changed for a moment. Perhaps he saw her fear, her weakness, her loneliness. But then he looked away quickly. His hands tightened around the box, and he said something under his breath that she could not hear. She only saw the shake of his head and the turn of his back. He continued on, blending back into the crowd, leaving her staring at his retreating figure. She let out a soft sigh and pressed the cardboard sign closer to her chest. The snow on the edges of the sign began to melt. She tried to readjust it so the words were visible to the next passerby, but her fingers were too stiff to hold it properly. Each time she tried to straighten it, it slipped, bending awkwardly. She pushed it down onto her lap and curled up against the cold wall behind her. Leaning against it gave her some comfort, but the cold still crept through her body. Settling in her bones, a woman passed by carrying a bag full of groceries. The smell of bread and cooked food made her stomach twist painfully. She looked at the girl, maybe for a second too long. The girl tried to gesture, pointing to her mouth, mouthing silent words, hoping the woman would understand. But the woman did not stop. She clutched her bag tighter, muttered something under her breath, and walked faster, her heels clicking sharply against the wet pavement. The sound of the heels felt like a punch to the girl's chest. She lowered her hand, her fingers curling around themselves. Holding warmth that was barely there, the night grew darker, and the streets became quieter, though the city never truly slept. A few streetlights flickered as if tired. The sound of distant car horns and the faint hum of engines was interrupted by the occasional laughter of people heading to late-night gatherings or last-minute shopping. Some groups passed, talking loudly about the gifts they had bought, their voices full of excitement. The girl listened, but could not respond. She could not ask for a bite of their food, could not ask for a small kindness. She could only watch and feel the pang of longing twist inside her. A store window caught her eye. Inside, children's toys and stuffed animals sat in perfect display. A little girl in a red coat pressed her face against the glass, pointing at a small bear, her mother holding her hand. The girl on the street smiled faintly, a tiny spark of warmth inside her heart. She remembered when she had once had someone to hold her hand, someone to smile at her. That was before the streets, before the cold, before the silence that had become her world. Now, she could only watch the happiness of others, remembering what she had lost. She tried to shift her position to get a little more comfort from the wall behind her. The ground was hard and wet, and her thin jacket provided little protection. A gust of wind blew through, catching her scarf and pulling it down from her neck. She quickly adjusted it, wrapping it tighter around her throat. Her fingers were stiff, and the motion took longer than she expected. She rubbed them against her jacket, trying to bring some warmth back into them. It was not enough. A security guard approached her from a nearby store. His steps were heavy and deliberate. He stopped a few feet away, looking down at her. He did not speak at first, only stared. She lifted her eyes slowly, the only way she could ask for understanding. The guard's face tightened. "You need to leave," he said, his voice firm and unyielding. She wanted to speak, to explain that she meant no harm, but no sound came out. She shook her head softly, pointing to her mouth and then to her ears, trying to show she could not speak. The guard sighed, annoyed, and waved his hand. "Move along," he repeated. She nodded, pulling her knees closer to her chest, making herself smaller, hoping he would leave soon. When he finally walked away, she let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The snow continued to fall, heavier now, and the wind was sharper. She shivered, hugging herself tightly. Hunger made her stomach ache, and cold made her muscles tense. Her lips were chapped, and her cheeks stung from the cold. She tried to close her eyes for a moment, imagining a warm place, a soft bed, a meal waiting for her. But the reality of the street pressed back immediately. The cold pavement, the distant noise, the indifferent people. She opened her eyes, staring at the falling snow, feeling utterly alone. A few more people passed. One man looked at her for a second, then stopped and muttered something about calling the police. She flinched and hugged herself tighter, wishing she could disappear into the shadows. She had learned the hard way that most people feared her or wanted nothing to do with her. Kindness was rare. Trust was even rarer. She had survived this way for so long that the familiar sting of rejection had become almost routine. Still, it hurt. Her stomach growled softly, but she ignored it. She could not let the pain show. People did not like to see suffering up close. She had learned to hide it, to make herself smaller, quieter, invisible. Her eyes wandered to a small piece of cardboard on the ground, thrown away by someone else. She picked it up, folding it carefully to use as a cushion between her and the wet pavement. The gesture was small, but it made her feel a little safer, a little warmer. Hours passed. The streets became emptier. The lights in the shops flickered or turned off completely. A few late-night shoppers hurried past, their faces tired but cheerful. The girl stayed where she was, shivering, writing in her mind what her cardboard sign could say next. Hunger gnawed at her, but she forced herself to stay calm, to stay quiet. She had to survive until morning, until someone noticed, until maybe, just maybe, something good happened. She thought about the people who had walked by, the ones who ignored her, the ones who looked at her with fear or annoyance. She did not blame them completely. They had lives, families, plans. But part of her longed for a single act of kindness, a hand extended, a warm smile. Even a small gesture would have made this night easier. Even a few words of comfort would have made her heart feel lighter. She hugged herself, leaning back against the wall again. Her mind wandered to memories of her childhood, of a time when she had known warmth and safety. The memories were faint, fragile, but they gave her strength to keep going. She had survived worse nights than this. She would survive tonight too. Somehow. She would find a way. Then, as if breaking through the heavy darkness around her, she noticed headlights moving slowly along the street. Not the harsh glare of regular cars, but a smooth, steady light, a slow approach. The car moved differently, as if it had come to stop for something important. She watched silently, her breath forming small clouds in the cold night air. She did not move. She did not hope too much. She only watched, waiting to see what would happen next. The city continued its busy hum. But for her, the world had narrowed to the slow, shining light moving toward her. She felt a small flicker of curiosity, something she had not felt in a long time. It was fragile and quiet, but it was there. And for now, that small flicker was enough to keep her eyes open. Enough to keep her heart beating against the cold and the silence. Enough to give her a reason to wait. The slow-moving car came to a stop a few feet away from her. Its engine hummed quietly, different from the noisy traffic around it. She did not move at first, her body frozen with a mixture of fear and curiosity. People had passed her all night, some ignoring her, some scolding her, some frightened of her. This car was different. Something about it felt different. It did not rush past. It paused as if it had come with purpose. A door opened, and a tall man stepped out. His coat was long and dark, clean and warm, unlike anything she had seen in weeks. His shoes were polished, shining even in the dim light of the street lamps. He walked toward her slowly, carefully, as if he did not want to startle her. She pressed herself closer to the wall, hugging her knees. She had learned to expect disappointment. She had learned to expect rejection. But she could not look away. There was something in his eyes, a softness, gentleness that made her hold her breath. The man stopped a few feet in front of her, kneeling down so his face was closer to hers. He did not speak loudly or shout. He only smiled gently, a small, kind smile. He held out his hand, but not to touch her forcefully, only to show that he meant no harm. She stared at it, hesitant. Her heart beat faster. Could he be different? Could he actually care? She did not trust easily, but there was something about his presence that made her relax a little. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook and a pen. He scribbled something quickly and held it out to her. She read it slowly. "Are you hungry? Can I help you?" His handwriting was careful, neat. He did not speak, yet the question was clear. She nodded slightly, unable to speak. She pointed to her mouth, then gestured toward the empty pavement beside her. The man nodded, understanding. Without a word, he signaled her to stand. Her legs were stiff from sitting for so long. She rose slowly, feeling the cold bite at her knees. She kept her eyes on him, unsure, yet hopeful. He did not rush her. He waited patiently, giving her the time she needed. The car door opened again, and he gestured toward it. She stepped closer, glancing back at the wet, cold pavement one last time. The city seemed far away from this small circle of light and warmth. Round the car, the man handed her a thick coat from the back seat. She hesitated, unsure if she should take it, but the cold made her fingers numb and her teeth chatter. She slipped it on quickly. The coat was too big, the sleeves falling past her hands, but it smelled warm and safe. It smelled like someone who cared. For the first time that night, she felt a little comfort. She wrapped it tightly around her, pressing it against her chest, feeling the warmth seep into her bones. He opened the car door again and gestured for her to get in. She looked up at him, searching his eyes for any sign of danger, but there was none. Only patience. Only care. She took a deep breath and climbed in, sitting quietly on the soft leather seat. The warmth of the car wrapped around her like a blanket. She shivered, not from fear, but from relief. She had survived the cold night, and now, for the first time in hours, she felt safe. The man leaned back in his seat, glancing at her with a soft smile. He did not ask questions immediately. He did not demand explanations. He waited. She felt a strange sense of calm in the silence. The city passed by outside, blurred lights and shadows. But inside the car, it was quiet and warm. The noise, the rushing people, the indifference, none of it mattered here. After a few minutes, he handed her the notebook and pen. She hesitated, then picked it up with trembling hands. Her writing was uneven, shaky, but she wrote quickly, wanting him to understand. "I am hungry," she scribbled. "I have nowhere to go. I am alone." She handed the notebook back. He read it carefully, nodding as he understood. He did not speak judgment, did not show impatience. He only nodded, as if hearing her story was important to him. He drove for a while, not saying a word. The city lights moved past the windows, people scurrying through streets, unaware of the small story unfolding in a quiet car. She hugged the coat around her tighter, watching him from the corner of her eyes. There was a calm confidence in the way he drove, a careful attention to detail. But it was his care for her that made her notice him more. He was not someone to ignore her. He had noticed. He had stopped. Finally, he pulled up outside a small 24-hour cafe. The smell of warm food drifted in as they entered. She had not smelled anything like it in days. Her stomach twisted with hunger, and for a moment she felt tears prick her eyes. She wanted to tell him how grateful she was, but no words came. She only pointed at the food, then at herself, then at the chair. He nodded again, understanding completely. The man ordered simple warm food for her. Bread, soup, water. She watched as he spoke softly to the cashier, ensuring everything was ready. When the food came, he gestured for her to eat first. She hesitated for a moment, then took the spoon. The soup was warm, the bread soft. Each bite felt like a miracle, filling her emptiness not just with food but with hope. She did not need words to tell him how much it meant. Her eyes shone, and for the first time that night, she smiled. He sat across from her, eating slowly, watching her carefully. He did not ask many questions. He knew she needed space. The way she ate quietly, carefully, showed him everything he needed to know. She had been surviving on her own for too long. She had been through more nights like this than most could imagine. He only listened, and that was enough. After she finished eating, he handed her a warm drink. She hugged it between her hands, letting the heat spread through her fingers. The notebook came out again, and she wrote quickly, explaining a little more. She told him about the streets, the cold nights, the hunger, the fear, and the loneliness. She wrote about the people who had ignored her, the ones who had been kind sometimes but not enough. Each word was careful, each sentence a small window into her life. He read it all, nodding slowly. He did not judge. He did not rush her. He only offered understanding. He scribbled something in his notebook and handed it back. "You are not alone anymore," it said. Her eyes widened slightly. She read it again, then again. The words were simple, but they felt powerful. She felt her heart beat faster, a strange new feeling spreading through her chest. Someone had finally seen her. Someone cared. She was not invisible tonight. They stayed in the cafe for a while longer. He made sure she was warm, full, and safe. He spoke softly when he needed to, asking her small questions she could answer with gestures or writing. He did not overwhelm her. He did not make her feel small or helpless. Instead, he treated her as if she were important, as if her story mattered, because it did. Finally, he stood up, gathering his things. She watched him, unsure of what would happen next. Would he leave? Would this be just another person who passed by, then vanished into the city night? But he did not leave. He held the notebook out to her. "I will help you," he wrote. She could hardly believe it. Words had power, but this promise felt like light breaking through darkness. She nodded slowly, tears forming again, but these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope, of gratitude. He smiled gently, helping her stand. Outside, the snow had stopped falling for a moment. The city seemed quieter, calmer. She felt the warmth of the coat, the warmth of the food, the warmth of someone's care. It was more than survival now. It was the beginning of something different, something she had not felt in a long time. Safety, attention, understanding. The man gestured toward the car again. She climbed in, feeling lighter than before. The city moved past them, distant and noisy. But inside the small bubble of warmth and care, she finally felt she belonged somewhere. Even if just for tonight, she was seen. Even if just for tonight, she was not alone. Even if just for tonight, she believed that someone cared. The drive continued. Quiet and calm, the streetlights passing like soft pulses of light. She hugged the coat around herself and held the notebook close. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. Not just for food, not just for warmth, not just for a few minutes of safety, but for a future where someone would notice her, care for her, and help her survive in a world that had seemed so cold and indifferent. The car moved smoothly through the quiet streets, the city lights reflecting softly on the windows. She hugged the warm coat around herself and held the notebook close, her hands trembling slightly. It wasn't just the cold that made them shake anymore. It was the strange mix of fear and hope building in her chest. She could not speak, but her eyes said everything she could not. She watched the man driving, noticing how calm he seemed, how carefully he moved through the streets. He did not look at her with pity, nor with judgment. He looked at her with understanding, something she had not experienced in years. After a while, the car stopped outside a small, well-lit building. The man turned to her, kneeling slightly to meet her eyes. He handed her the notebook. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should write. But she did. Her fingers shook as she scribbled quickly. "Where are we going?" She wrote, her handwriting messy but readable. He smiled gently and wrote back, "Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can rest and be warm." The words were simple, but they carried weight. They promised more than just a place to sit. They promised care. He opened the car door and helped her out. The snow had stopped falling, but the cold lingered, biting at her cheeks and fingers. She shivered and instinctively hugged herself, but the coat was warm, and the man did not rush her. He guided her gently inside. The warmth hit her immediately, soft and comforting, unlike anything she had felt on the streets. She took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs and her heart. For the first time that evening, she allowed herself to relax, even a little. The building was quiet but welcoming. There were soft chairs, blankets folded neatly on a table, and a small fireplace in the corner. The smell of fresh bread and hot tea filled the room. She sat down slowly, careful not to disturb anything. The man gestured toward the blankets and food. She looked at the table, her eyes wide. She had not eaten properly in days. Her stomach twisted painfully, reminding her how hungry she was. But the food before her smelled safe, warm, and nourishing. She reached for a piece of bread, feeling the warmth spread through her fingers. Each bite seemed to chase away the cold creeping through her body. The man watched her silently at first, allowing her to eat without interruption. He did not press questions, did not rush, did not make her feel small. She noticed this. It was rare. Most people had asked too many questions or judged her too quickly. He simply waited, giving her the space she needed. When she finished, she took a deep breath and opened the notebook again, writing quickly to explain a little more. "I have nowhere to sleep," she wrote. "The streets are cold. People are mean. I am alone." She handed it back to him. He read it carefully, nodding as he understood. He did not look surprised or shocked. He only looked concerned, patient, and determined. He wrote something in the notebook and handed it back. "You will have a place tonight," it said, and more. "You will not be alone anymore." She read the words slowly, feeling her heart pound. She wanted to cry, but the tears were different this time. They were not just for fear or pain. They were for hope, for relief, for a small promise of safety. She hugged the coat tighter around herself, feeling warmth spread from her chest to her hands and feet. For the first time in a long time, she felt that someone truly cared. The man motioned for her to follow him. They walked down a short hallway, the walls painted in soft colors, the floor warm beneath her shoes. He opened a door and gestured inside. The room was small but comfortable. A single bed with clean blankets, a nightstand, a lamp, and a window overlooking the city. She stepped inside slowly, her eyes wide. She had not seen a bed like this in months, maybe years. She approached it carefully, almost afraid to touch it. When she sat down, the mattress was soft, the blankets warm. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel safe. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to relax completely. He sat across from her, speaking gently as he wrote in the notebook. "You are safe here. You will not have to be afraid. You will not be cold or hungry again tonight." She nodded, tears forming again, but they were quiet, controlled. She wrote back, "Why are you helping me? I am just a girl on the street. I have nothing." He smiled softly, the kind of smile that made her feel small, but not unimportant. He wrote, "Because someone needed to notice you. Because you deserve kindness. Because you are human, and I cannot ignore that." She looked at him, unable to speak, and realized that words were not necessary. The meaning was clear. He cared. He had seen her, and he had chosen to act. Hours passed as she rested in the warm room. The man brought her more food, tea, and a fresh blanket. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, each sip, each moment of safety. He did not rush her, did not ask for explanations, did not make her feel like a burden. Instead, he spoke softly, writing small messages in the notebook, asking questions she could answer with gestures or scribbles. She explained a little of her life, her days on the streets, the cold nights, the hunger, the loneliness. He listened, truly listened. She had not experienced that in years. To be heard, to be understood without judgment, felt like warmth spreading through her body, more comforting than the fire or the coat. When she finally lay down on the bed, wrapped in blankets, she felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. Could this really be real? Could someone truly care? Could someone truly notice a small, mute girl sitting alone on the street? She closed her eyes, letting herself imagine a life different from the cold streets. A life with safety, warmth, food, and someone who cared. The thoughts were fragile but comforting. They were like small sparks in the darkness, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe they could grow. The man stayed nearby, quiet, patient. He did not ask for thanks, did not demand promises. He only ensured she was comfortable, warm, and safe. His actions spoke louder than words ever could. He refilled her tea, made sure her blankets were snug, adjusted her coat when she shivered. Each small act of care built trust, slowly but surely. She realized that trust could exist, even in a world that had been so cold and cruel. She could feel it growing inside her heart. As the night deepened, the city outside grew quiet. The streets emptied, leaving only the soft hum of distant traffic. Inside, the warmth of the room wrapped around her like a cocoon. She hugged the blanket tighter, holding on to the comfort and care that had been given to her. She wrote in the notebook one last time before sleep, "Thank you. I feel safe." The man nodded, smiling softly. He did not need her words to know she was grateful. He had already seen it in her eyes, in her small gestures, the way she relaxed for the first time in years. Sleep came slowly, but it came. She lay on the soft bed, wrapped in warmth and comfort, feeling the tension in her body ease. The cold streets, the harsh voices, the rejection, they seemed far away now. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream. Not about miracles, not about magic, but about a small hope that someone had noticed her, that someone cared, and that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The night passed quietly. With the soft glow of the lamp keeping the darkness at bay, she slept, her breathing deep and steady, her body finally resting. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the small story unfolding in a quiet room. But inside, a life had begun to change, quietly, gently, humanly. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the warmth of true kindness. Morning came quietly, soft light spilling through the small window. She woke slowly, her body stiff from a night of rest she had not known in months. For a moment she forgot where she was, thinking of the cold streets, the hard pavement, the endless nights of hunger and fear. Then she remembered the blankets, the warmth, the small room, and the quiet presence of someone who truly cared. She sat up, pulling the blankets around her shoulders, feeling the soft comfort of the bed against her back. Her heart felt light, almost as if a weight she had carried for years had begun to lift. The man was already awake, sitting quietly at a small table nearby, writing in his notebook. When he looked up, he smiled gently, a smile that made her feel safe, important, and seen. He did not speak harshly or command her to move. Instead, he gestured toward a simple breakfast he had prepared: warm bread, eggs, and tea. The smell made her stomach twist with hunger, but it was a good hunger now, not the gnawing emptiness of the street. She reached for the food, her hands still trembling, and ate slowly, savoring each bite. The warmth of the tea slid down her throat and into her stomach, a comfort she had not felt in years. As she ate, she thought about the streets she had left behind, the nights of snow, the people who ignored her, the harsh voices, and the cold. All of it felt distant now, but the memory still lingered like a shadow. She shivered slightly, not from cold, but from remembering how alone she had felt. The man noticed her shiver and handed her the notebook. She wrote quickly, asking where she would go next. He read it, smiled softly, and wrote back, "Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can learn, grow, and feel hope again." His words were simple, but they carried more weight than anything she had known. They promised stability, care, and a future. After breakfast, he helped her get dressed. Her old jacket was left behind, replaced with warm clothes that fit her properly. For the first time in months, her shoes were dry and strong, the coat sturdy and comfortable. She felt strange, almost embarrassed by the luxury, but he did not make her feel that way. Instead, he treated her naturally, as if she deserved it without explanation. She followed him out of the small building, stepping into the crisp morning air. The city was waking up, people rushing through streets, unaware of the small, quiet story unfolding behind a closed door. But she noticed. She noticed everything: the warmth, the safety, the act of being seen. He led her to a nearby car, smaller than the luxury one from the night before, but still comfortable. She climbed in carefully, holding the notebook close. He drove calmly through the city, avoiding busy streets. She did not ask many questions. She did not need to. The trust she felt in his presence was enough. She watched the world pass by, noticing how different it looked now that she was not struggling for survival. The streets seemed softer, the air lighter, the sounds less harsh. For the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere in the world. After a short drive, they arrived at a small center for children and teens in need. It was not flashy, not grand, but it radiated care. The walls were painted in soft colors, and the air smelled faintly of books and cleaning supplies. There were small rooms for sleeping, a kitchen, and a classroom. She stepped inside cautiously, glancing around at the other children and teens. They were busy with activities, reading, or talking softly among themselves. Some noticed her and smiled. She felt a little warmth rise in her chest. Smiles were rare in her life. Recognition even rarer. He guided her to a small room prepared just for her. A bed, clean blankets, a small desk, and a few personal items. She stepped in slowly, her eyes wide. This would be her home, at least for now. The man knelt down, holding out the notebook once more. She wrote, "Will I have to sleep on the streets again?" He shook his head firmly and wrote back, "Never again. You have a place now. You have people who care." Tears formed in her eyes, but they were no longer of fear. They were of relief and hope, flowing freely down her cheeks. She hugged the blanket tightly, feeling the warmth seep into her body and soul. Days passed slowly, but steadily. She learned the routines of the center, how to interact with the staff and other children. She started learning sign language and simple reading and writing exercises. Each small achievement made her smile quietly to herself. She realized that life could be more than just surviving. It could be about learning, growing, and feeling safe. Each day she felt stronger. Each day, she felt more human, more whole, more alive. The nights on the streets felt farther away. Like a dark story she had read but did not belong to anymore, the man visited her regularly, sometimes bringing small gifts, sometimes only spending time, listening and understanding. He never demanded anything in return. He did not ask her to be grateful in words, did not push her to talk. He simply acted with care, letting her know that someone had noticed her and that she mattered. Slowly, she began to trust again, to feel that the world could be kind. She started to hope not just for survival, but for a future where she could thrive. Months went by, and she changed. She learned more each day, mastering sign language and beginning to write neatly. Her confidence grew. She spoke through her hands and writing, expressing thoughts she had kept locked inside for so long. The streets, the cold, the hunger, they became memories, not reality. The world was still hard at times, but now she had people to help her, guide her, and protect her. She no longer felt invisible. One evening, nearly a year after that first cold Christmas Eve, she stood near the window of her room, looking at the city lights. Snow had begun to fall again. This time, it did not feel harsh. It felt soft, gentle, like the world had changed around her. She remembered the night she had cried on the pavement, cold and alone. She remembered the luxury car, the warmth, the kindness of the man who had stopped. She smiled, tears forming, but this time they were only of gratitude and joy. She had survived. She had been seen. She had been cared for. The man came into the room quietly, holding a small notebook. She greeted him with a smile and wrote quickly, "I am happy now." "Thank you." He read it and nodded, his smile gentle and understanding. He did not boast about the good he had done. He did not seek praise. He simply continued to act with kindness, knowing that seeing her safe and happy was enough reward. She looked at him, realizing that one act of care had changed her life completely. One simple act had saved her from despair and darkness. She continued to grow, learning more, feeling more, and living more fully. She made friends, discovered new interests, and found joy in small things. A warm meal, a book, a kind word, or simply the sun on her face. Life had not always been fair, but it had finally shown her that kindness existed, that people could care deeply, even for someone who seemed invisible. Each day she spent in safety, each day she felt valued. She remembered the Christmas Eve when everything had begun to change. Years later, she would remember that night not just as the night she was rescued, but as the night hope returned to her life. She would remember the fear, the hunger, and the cold. But she would also remember warmth, care, and the quiet act of kindness that changed everything. She knew that one person noticing her, taking the time to care, had created a ripple that would last a lifetime. She had been given more than food or warmth. She had been given a chance to live, to grow, and to be loved. And as she stood at the window looking at the falling snow, she knew that kindness mattered more than anything else. A single act, a simple gesture, had saved her life. The streets, the cold, the loneliness, they were part of her past, but they no longer defined her. She had a future now. A life filled with hope, love, and the knowledge that even in the darkest moments someone could appear, stop, and change everything with nothing more than care. The story of that Christmas Eve was no longer just about a poor, mute girl crying on the street. It had become a story of survival, trust, and the extraordinary power of human kindness. And for her, it would be a story she carried forever, quietly, proudly, and gratefully, knowing that one person's compassion had given her a chance to live again,